So yes, my name is Ashley Rifkin. I work with the Office of International Students and Scholars. And I would like to thank the RCSGD for joining for this event today. We're actually celebrating International Education Week this week with a variety of events, this being one of them. And International Education Week is celebrating the values and the contributions of global exchange, both in our campus community as well as students going abroad, and the information and the cultures and ideas that they're bringing back to our campus once again. And so this is in line with those things. So we want to just thank you all once again for participating with this. And as we get started, I'd like to introduce Solaire. Solaire is going to be our facilitator for this evening's event. So thank you very much.
Well, hello everybody. Happy International Education Week. I'm Solaire Deneau. I use pronouns she, her, hers. I'm a second year PhD student in comparative literature, and I'm also the graduate student assistant for the Resource Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity, and the event coordinator for the QTGSU, so the Queer and Trans Graduate Student Union. So I'm an international student from France mainly. I also lived in Haiti a bit, but I arrived here as an international student from France. So before we start, and I ask all the panelists to introduce themselves, we wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this place and all land upon which the university is located, and pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, for they hold the memories, the tradition, and the culture of this area, which has become a place of learning for people from all over the world. So now I would like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. So your name, pronouns, your position at the in the university, what you do, and maybe where you're from. Who wants to start, or should I put one to somebody? Jordan?
Yeah, I can start if you want. My name is Jordan Tedisco. I use they, them pronouns. I am a fourth year in comparative literature in the PhD program. I'm also the graduate assistant for education initiatives at the Resource Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity, and the president of the Queer and Trans Graduate Student Union. And yeah, I'm from France.
I can go next. Thank you so much for having me. Happy International Education Week. My name is Chongzhen Wei, Wei Chongzhen. I use he and they pronouns. I'm a second year doctoral student in counseling psychology. I grew up in China, but I also lived in France and Thailand when I was working at UNESCO on education for gender equality and sexuality education. And now my research focuses on LGBTQ mental health.
Hi, my name is Kaido Wang. I'm a third year pharmacology major. I'm from China. My position is I'm the AS Trans and Queer Commission International Student Engagement Coordinator. I'm sorry, that title is so long. What else? Oh, I use he, him pronouns. It's an honor to be here.
So we have some questions in advance that I'm gonna ask you, panelists, and then people can add questions to the Q&A section of the webinar. I'm gonna check this section. So first of all, we would like to ask you, what does the LGBTQ+ culture look like in your home country? Somebody want to jump in? Or I can start. So, I guess as a French person, there is a huge distinction between Paris and the rest of France. So I grew up in a village. It was extremely different being Black and a lesbian there. It is not Paris at all, and it's very rural, it is very white, it is very traditional. I think Jordan can back me up on that. So it was very much not talking about it and acting as if I just don't have a sexuality at all, until I could leave. So I guess that was my experience.
Yeah, I have the same experience as Solaire. Also from rural France. My dad is from Sicily, so super Catholic. Like he has pictures of the last 3 popes above his bed and stuff like that. So it was definitely not. Yeah, like I mean, in that rural part, I actually don't even know what LGBTQ plus culture would look like because I was just not part of it, and I guess other people who were part of it were also kind of like hidden until we were all able to leave to the big city. So so yeah, that's also my experience.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I also grew up in a very like rural area. Um, I don't see other people like me, or maybe I have an uncle that I think maybe he is a queer, but he is never out, because when his brother was trying to buy a bribe for him from Vietnam, they went to Vietnam, and he was in a hotel room with that woman, and then he ran off. That's what I heard from my family members. So I actually noted down some key points about the LGBTQ culture in China, and Kai Dong can always share more. So when it comes to LGBTQ populations, I think of like gender roles. It's still very rigid in China. Like men need to be this way, women need to be that way. There are traditional values that people need to obey, and it's very expected for you to have a family, a heterosexual family, have kids. If you don't get married and have children, your parents will ask you why, and they will start doing like matchmaking for you, and all your friends and colleagues will also ask you, why are you single? Why don't you want to have kids? So there's a lot of pressure for people to get married. And I have many queer friends enter heterosexual marriage without like their own willingness. It's like a way to conform to the traditional value, traditional family culture. Yeah, which caused a lot of tragedies, because these people are unhappy in these marriages. And there's another issue which is very interesting. We call it arranged marriage. Like a gay man might find a lesbian woman to get married and perform the marriage in front of their family members, and then they actually live separately, but they have to be together when their parents come to visit. So and I also want to mention a lot of LGBT cultures center gay and male gay people, not so much queer women, and very few representation for trans people as well. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can definitely agree to that. My experience is kind of different, so I don't live in a particular rural city. Like I live in a smaller city. It's not like Beijing or Shanghai, like those mega cities. But it's definitely like more liberal than most places comparatively. My family are very liberal, so I'm very grateful for that. But I can definitely agree that there's a lot of pressure for you to get married into like a heterosexual marriage, and also like um, there are like unspoken rules about like if you're not straight, you cannot progress within the government or the military or like any corporation owned by the government. And also in like school systems, like queerness and transness are really like taboo, but I wouldn't say like it is like blunt like homophobia and transphobia. It's just like a lot of like heteronormativity and like cis normativity, which can be problematic. And at least like from my experience, I don't see a lot of like queer spaces in my city. But I recently realized that might just be my issue. So like it might be just my city, because like apparently in Shanghai or Beijing, like there are like queer spaces, but they're kind of dying out. Maybe dying out is a better word. It's like there has been a cultural shift in the recent years, and you can definitely feel like it is harder for queer and trans individuals to be vocal and to be present in.
Well, thank you for your answers. And now I'm going to ask another question that is kind of related to this one. So what are some misconceptions about the LGBTQ plus community in your home country? Start the game.
I can start this time. Misconceptions. There is still a lot of stigma and misunderstanding around homosexuality. Many people might still think this is a mental illness, even though it was pathologized in 2001 in China. Conversion therapy is still in practice in many mental health hospitals, sadly, or others. And there are very insulting terms for trans people. Like in Chinese, we say 人妖, like half human, half monster, to describe trans people. It's really insulting. But now more and more people are using the term transgender, but it requires a lot of efforts to do public education. What else? Yeah, I think that's what I thought about. Oh, also misconceptions about bisexual people. Like bisexuality is just a phase. It's not a real identity. You will either be a straight person or a gay person, and it's kind of binary conception of sexuality. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess to me, I mean, I grew up in a bicultural family, so I guess on the Haitian side, it's just not a thing at all. Which is interesting because culturally, I mean, the voodoo religion, which is the main religion in Haiti, is pretty queer friendly, actually. But I mean, several, I don't know, waves of Christian missionaries and a lot of political and economical problem. It's always the fault of minorities. So it created a very hostile context for queer people. I guess it's also about my positionality. I'm like the girl who studies, so it's like it would be a huge disappointment, hi dad, if I was queer. I hope you would never see that. And in France, I guess for most people in France, if people perceive you as a man, I guess it would mean that you're kind of, I don't know, maybe half female. That's how they would perceive you, or like not a full man. And for women, when we're queer, I think they perceive us as traumatized. I think that's how I feel it. It's like, have you been raped or something, or what do you have against men? Are you this crazy feminist? And then when I arrived in Paris, which is supposed to be more open, so France is not as open as what people think it is. For example, like we had gay marriage very recently, thanks to a Black woman, by the way, I'm dropping that out there, Christiane Taubira, that's her name. It is a Black woman who made slavery recognized as a crime against humanity and gay marriage, just here you go. And yeah, and so I guess Paris is very much like, as long as you stay in the gay neighborhood, it's fine. The gay neighborhood being mostly white and gay, actually gay, with people who look like me. Yeah, if you stay in this community, it can be fine if you're white. And I guess the main stigma in Paris is that we are irresponsible, we live at night, we are too much. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I can definitely second what Soler said. And my experience in Paris was not that great. I mean, better than the rural countryside, but it was not as magical as you think it's gotta be when you're from the rural countryside. And I think that, yeah, like Soler said, like for me, like for instance, like the in the rural countryside, the biggest issue that people had with me is that I had long hair. Like it was not necessarily because of queerness, but it was assumed to be queerness. But like, it was just a weird sort of like blurred lines, right, between just having long hair and being gay. And then I feel like when I went to Paris, it feels like most gay people there, or at least assigned male at birth gay people there, then like overperform the opposite way, and everyone is super into hypermasculine gender codes and hypermasculine clothing and hypermasculine behavior and I mean what they deem to be hypermasculine. And so I was definitely not part of that either. Yeah, like I don't know, like I've had horror stories in Paris of like being asked to show my gender marker on my ID to enter a gay bar because it's only for men and I didn't look like a man. So it was just like not as open-minded as I thought it would be. And so for me, like I think I found most of my community in alternative circles that were not necessarily only queer or only gay, but that were more about just, you know, everyone alternative. So lots of
I also feel that the misunderstandings that I felt for me were also very much related to my race. A lot of time it was, I mean, I'm expected to be the top. Like if I'm in a couple with a person who's not Black, I'm definitely expected to be aggressive, top, leading, aggressively dumb, kind of. People are surprised if I say something smart. So it was very difficult in the queer community to just feel that even there, I couldn't really be myself. But after 2 or 3 years, I found Black queer people. They exist. It's just a little bit difficult to find the place where they are, but they exist. So yeah, maybe should I move on to the next question, or do you want to add something? Okay. So what changes could be made on campus to better support LGBTQA plus international folks, according to you?
I can start. Yeah, so my experience is kind of different because like I'm the only undergrad here. Um, I feel like in my case, the one thing that we could do, like especially for the RCSGD, is like have more like open spaces, like for people to like come and talk and learn. Especially like for me, I never really got a chance to fully develop my queerness when I was back home. So when I first got here, I just got kind of thrown out there. So like, there's like I don't know anything about like Grindr or whatever. Um, yeah, that kind of stuff is just really like make it even more difficult for me to like um reconcile with myself because like I feel like, oh, this is like how Americans do it, but like it is like how it's supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? So definitely can have like more discussion space or like workshops or like seminars just to talk about like what it means, um, what queerness or transness means for themselves. so they have a place to develop those identities by themselves.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I think the kind of event that we implement should match the it's like there is a queer culture in America and maybe in Western countries in general. Like it's very centered around parties, and which is great. I love parties, but I know that I talk to a lot of international folks, particularly from non-Western countries, who are not comfortable with that when they arrived, because you need, I mean, it can be difficult to arrive in a queer community in which people are very confident because they had occasions to explore their sexualities or maybe their identities before. And the person told me, well, I would just like a space with board games, not necessarily to talk about my identities, but just to chill out with like a very simple activity, 5 or 6 people, not more. I don't know. I guess, yeah, more events, more bigger diversity of events, maybe more confidentiality, because I think that we really need to acknowledge that a lot of people who arrive in grad school, like they can have very different experiences of queerness, and sometimes they maybe a lot of still internalized hate, or I mean, you can arrive and just, you have a lot to explore, and there is like a gap between American people and them because they didn't have the same experience. And sometimes they just need a chill space, maybe to, I don't know if it makes sense, but to maybe not even talk about queerness, but just to take it slow. Yeah.
And I think too, one other thing is, in that differences that I've heard from some of my friends who come here from like other European countries or other countries around the world, where it's, you also don't know the codes of what it means to be part of the community here in the US. And so then it's really sometimes hard to navigate or to understand, like with then, you know, also English being a barrier, understanding like, oh, this word is okay, but that one is not. And then we say it this way, we don't say it that way. And it's all of those things that, well, how are you supposed to know? Because that's not what you'll learn when you learn English in another country. They don't talk about those topics, right? And so I don't know, like I feel like a lot of the people I know around me are scared of being in queer and trans spaces because they're scared of saying the wrong thing and just being attacked instead of, you know, being allowed, like, I don't know, like, of course there's a line to navigate, but like instead of, you know, maybe having more conversation or education about it, like it feels like because we are attacked so often, it's easy to assume that things are attacks when sometimes they're awkward things due to language. I don't know how to, yeah.
No, I definitely agree with that. And I think we should also think that we are in California, which is not just the United States. Because even from Paris, as you said, Jordan, I've heard the word non-binary maybe 2 years before I arrived here. So for a lot of people, it's like actual ignorance. But yeah, it doesn't excuse any like attack or assault, of course. But yeah, there is a part of cultural difference that people need to acknowledge. Definitely.
It just, yeah, a lot of expectations and assumptions of like, well, you're queer, so you should know this, right? And we don't need to teach you because you should know. And it's like, well, okay. So yeah, I think, and I don't know what kind of like events could be done to like navigate that, right? But yeah. And then I feel like there's lots of things that need to be improved in the city that are not things that UCSB has authority over, but because like Santa Barbara is not great,
yeah,
in general,
yeah,
but that's another topic.
Yeah, I agree with many things shared. I think there are so many factors compound together. There's cultural assimilation. Just as a foreigner, as an international student, regardless of your sexual identity, there are so many new norms that you need to learn as a international person, the language, the chords, and even just getting around, finding food, doing grocery shopping can be difficult. And then on top of that, there are, I think, racism issues as well, even within LGBTQ community. If you are a person of color and you go to an event where you see mostly white people, you will notice right away you are different, and then you will be very careful of your behaviors, whether you will be accepted and welcomed here. And then on top of that, the language barrier, and the different culture, like you said, Solek, the party culture. I think that's not something that I grew up with in China. I only was exposed to queer parties in Paris. And I think what will be helpful is to have more intimate and private space for international LGBTQ people to connect with each other. Because when the differences are so large, it becomes intimidating and overwhelming for you to cope with. So we need some allies and friends to support us in this transition. And I think there's also a need to educate white American LGBTQ folks about the experiences of international LGBTQ people, because it's also their responsibility to, as a community member, to welcome other people, to make other people feel included. This is an overall U.S. issue, because American students only think about U.S. U.S. is the whole world, and international students think of the world as a global planet.
No,
Yeah,
definitely.
oh, sorry. Yeah, I kind of want to like discuss on something like that. Like Celia mentioned, like, oh, like there's expectation for you to be a top, but like for me, I feel like when I first came to the US, like there's an expectation for me to be a bottom, like just because I'm Asian. Like I once got a message on Grindr from a middle-aged white man. Like no like context, just like you look like a submissive Asian bottom, like out of blue, which is so funny for me. Um, but like I feel like that speaks a lot. Like for myself, like my experience with like being queer in America, it's just like I never got a chance to be myself. I just quickly got molded into that stereotype that people expect me to be. And also, I kind of want to talk about like Jordan's point. Like, I feel like our lack of like consensus about like what language to use could be a disadvantage or it could be a advantage, because like for me, never like so like for me like all these words doesn't have any meanings to me. There's no social context to me because I learned it as a language but I didn't use it as my way of thinking. So for me it is really easy to like pick up people's correct pronouns because it doesn't have a meaning. It doesn't have the same meaning as like someone who grew up in a society that only speaks English. um, I think like it could be an advantage at some point.
All right. No, that's true because it doesn't have an emotional background. Also, you just learn it as a grammar, as a new grammar rule. Did you want to say something, Chong?
Related to that advantage, I feel like sometimes there's less pressure when you don't know the language. Like when I just started learning French in Paris, I went to parties and people were talking to each other, and then I could just be myself and do things that I like to do without really attending to other people's needs, because I didn't understand the whole context. And same when I was in Thailand, I also didn't know Thai language in order to understand what other people were saying. So I could just, sometimes it's just freer to not care about others, because I have to otherwise constantly evaluate, oh, what are the expectations? What should I say? What should I do in order to fit in? Yeah.
Well, I have a question that is kind of related to what you just said. So how was your experience of being queer or trans on campus differed from that at home? You partly answered.
Yeah, so I can continue maybe. My experiences, I appreciate all the work that Soleil and Jordan, you are doing for queer and trans graduate students to foster a sense of community and organizing events. I attended, I think, some events before COVID when I was living on campus. And I think it was a good experience overall to know other graduate students, queer and trans graduate students, to be connected. But somehow I feel the difference, between me and others. The accent that I have when I speak English, and the skin color, and we don't have many. I mean, I didn't feel like I have a lot of shared culture with other people in order to connect with them, to really feel like, oh, I belong to this community. I also, there's another interesting experience that I want to share. I went to a Halloween party organized by MCC. It was a party for persons of color, and then queer and trans person of color. So they just try to put two groups together. But like, we didn't really hang out with each other, like there was a table with all Asian people, a table with all African American people, and then there was not really any efforts to address queer and trans issues at that event. You just put everyone together because of their shared identities, without really attending to their specific needs. So I feel like it was not a very good experience for me. Yeah.
Well, my experience on campus, it's very different. There is no campus culture in France. University is like a building. You go, you take your class, you go home, bye-bye. So you can have literally no friends in your university. So I think the main difference to me is that we are less mixed here. That's weird to say that, but in the sense that the queer community in Paris can be from street sex workers to university professors in the same place, with migrants or not. Like, it was very, it's all Paris basically in the same place, which is not the case on campus. I'm not saying that there are not people here with terrible histories and traumas and things like that, but I've seen things that were way more violent in Paris. Like, I have seen people who were like, I don't know, the people depressed to a point that I'm not gonna trauma porn, but like I've seen horrible things that not that I don't see here, but not to the same extent. And also, as Keijo said, like we're not connected the same way to this space. So when I see a Black lesbian woman in Paris being hospitalized or things like that, it touches me way more. Because it was really my community. So here I feel that I can do more actual concrete work because I'm more in peace, because the campus is closed, because I know most queer people, and there are less external violence that arrive all the time, because if I want to stay among my people here, I can, which was very difficult in a big city. So I'm not saying the situation is better here in general. I'm saying the context in which I'm right now allows me to be a little bit more in peace. Doesn't mean that there is no violence here at all, but I really cannot compare to what I've seen in the past. And the good things here is that I feel that mental health is more a thing. for American people. So for the first time, I could ask for a Black therapist, which is illegal in France. So yeah, in France, gathering among Black people and asking for a Black person specifically is illegal, so I could never do it. So I never had a therapist with whom I could talk about racism or racism and being a lesbian, or they were all straight and white. So basically I could talk about nothing. I never really could do an actual therapy before arriving in the United States, so that was great. I could start the work here. Yeah, I think that these were the main differences for me.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, it's very like the difference is really stark, because like before coming here, like I just couldn't, like I said, like non-binary identities are not really legible, or it's hard to think through them in France and in French. And so I just didn't know it was a thing. And so like it's only when I came here like 6 years ago and started exploring identity here that I realized that. So like yeah, my experiences are completely different, because like I've always known that like manhood, womanhood, like that I didn't really fit within any of those, but I didn't know that there was any other options. So yeah, so like being here just allowed me to explore all of that. And then similar to Solaire, like the amount of traumatic experiences I've had in Paris in 5 years, I think like the amount of traumatic experiences I've had maybe in a year in Paris, I didn't have here in 7. So it's just, yeah, like Solaire said, I'm not saying that there's no issues here and that there are lots of issues and there's also danger here, but I felt way more comfortable exploring because of what Solaire said. Like the setting is more bounded and you're just seeing less people. Like in Paris, it's like you want to go to one place and you're walking past like thousands of people in the subway, and so there's more chances for things to happen, right? So yeah.
Yeah, this is not a city, it is a campus. Like if we were in New York, it would be different, I guess.
Exactly. So it's not necessarily US versus France, but like the differences in settings, right? But yeah, and then yeah, like I said too, it's like in France, if I were to say I'm non-binary, I use the French equivalent of they them pronouns. Like it would just be resisted so much, and people would just question it and just not do it. And of course, I'm being misgendered here, and there are still people not doing a great job at it, but a lot of people around me, or that I keep around me, are really good at it. And so that I'm already preparing myself to lose that when I leave UCSB, and figuring out like how to navigate that. But yeah.
Yeah, from my experience, I mean, I'm just grateful that there is a queer space in UCSB. Um, like really, thanks to RCSGD, like they're really putting to the work. Um, but I mean, I feel like yeah, like everyone said, UCSB is not completely a safe space for queer and trans individuals. Like literally, like the first week I got there, and like it was during Halloween, and I heard like people called police on the queer and trans party, but not the other party, and it was really traumatic for a lot of people. Like people are like fleeing, and like because the police were there. Like that was like literally my second day when I got here, um, so it wasn't great. Um, from that perspective, but also on the other hand, like there are places where if you go there, there are people who, um, who are like have similar experiences and like who support this safe space, um, and it's just like an overall better experience. Like it just make everything better. because you know, like even if you feel isolated, even if you feel you're not welcome here, like you can always like someone else to go. I do wish that UCSB is overall more like they can do better and they should do better, but like right now it's like it is what it is. Um, on a lighter note, um, I feel like personally my struggle with like fitting in with like the queer and trans community here is just like I don't know any of their references. Like I don't watch Drag Race. Like I feel like I'm an outsider for not watching Drag Race, and it is like so weird, and so like nitpicking. But like it's just like small things like that. Like we just grew up in different cultural background, and sometimes it's really hard to find like a common topic to talk about. So I feel like just like my personal challenge. Um,
All right. And how would you say your or what ways would you say in what ways would you say that being an international LGBTQ plus affected your identity?
I can start. I feel like there's a there's a disconnection between my international identity or like specifically my Chinese identity with my queer identity. Because like I never really had my queer identity fully developed when I was in China. So when I came to the US, I'm now already American. So, but I took on like I took on bits of like what queerness means, like what it means to be a gay man, like while I was in the US. So it kind of feels weird to say that I'm international while I'm in a like queer space. Um, I can't really quite put a finger on it because it just like I feel like there's a disconnect between my ethnic and my cultural background with my queerness. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that because we received so many negative messages about being queer or being trans in China, and now living in another culture, learning being queer, being trans is actually something that you can feel proud, and you should um, live your life. I mean, this kind of new notion of being yourself was was not easy for me to accept at the beginning because I grew up in this collective culture where my identity is so tied with my family, with the whole nation, with the culture I grew up with. But I think being queer means to separate from those forces where you felt depressed or suppressed, and in order to develop my own identities to live my own life. So so I really understand this disconnection and this contradiction, conflicts within myself that I have to cope with. Um, and what else I also want to share, in terms of being an international LGBTQ people, I think it has a huge impact on my campus life. It affects on how how I make friends, who I want to hang out with, and um, what do I share in the class? What are my research subject? Um, so many things. Like I think it almost affects every aspect of my life. Um, Hugely important. And I, at the same time, even though there are many international students at UCSB, I don't feel like um, I know many people. I think personally in my personal life, I know very few of them, and um, I feel I feel like I'm not connected with this community. Yeah. Mm.
Um, ooh, to me, I mean, it changed a lot of things, but I think it's because I changed country. I mean, I've lived in 3 countries now. Um, I guess the first time it was a shock because people perceive everything differently. It's a shock in terms of identity because people perceive you so differently that you end up being like, who am I? But like the third time I migrated, so now I think I learned my lesson. There are 2 possibilities in that kind of case. Either you try to fit in and you will never, or you just decide that you don't care. And I think that's me, and it helps to not be in my home country. In France, I used to use my given name for any official situation. So class, university, and then when I was in the queer community, I would use Solaire. And here, the first thing that I did is to just change name and just live as I wanted to live because I'm not emotionally connected to that space. So I really don't care. I really don't care. And I feel that I'm more queer in the sense that I am way more detached to a lot of things that used to make me feel very bad. Now, because precisely I decided that whatever, I'm not gonna stay here. So, and I guess what it changed regarding my identity also is that a lot of things that were a weight for me in France do not exist here. So, like, if you talk about blackness, for example, like there is racism in both countries, definitely, and it's terrible here. But the thing is, for example, when Black people here have a Southern accent, they are way more discriminated. But nobody hears the accent that I have in French. You know what I mean? Nobody can tell from what socioeconomical class I'm from. Nobody can tell that I sometimes, when I'm tired, I can have a Caribbean accent. It can go back. Nobody hears that here. So a lot of problems that I had in France, I do not have them here because people just perceive my French elitist fancy accent and they don't get that in France. I'm not even considered French. So that's a thing that is, I mean, there are plenty of things that are just out of my chest again. So if I was a Black person who grew up here, it would have been definitely different. I still experience racism here, that's not what I mean, but certain specificity in terms of exoticism and the way French people perceive me as like an internal migrant kind of, it doesn't exist here. Here I'm French. I say I'm French, nobody's like, but French from where? Yeah, so there are some stuff that just I can breathe for certain kind of, for classism and for some form of xenophobia, and yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough question, but I resonate with a lot of what everyone has been saying. And yeah, in terms of, I think for me there was a couple of things, like in terms of class in France, it was pretty, like the perception of class from others on, like, of my class was pretty strong, linked to my rural accent. And I mean, literally people would call me peasant and, you know, really make me feel like Paris was not where I was supposed to be. And so, yeah, of course, like this is not a thing here because, like Soler said, it's like the accent is French. Like the accent doesn't sound anything else than French. So there's that. And then there's different things. I mean, there's different things how I feel about being labeled international student, because I'm like, well, depending on where you're from, it doesn't mean the same thing. And we don't all have the same experience. Like some people are international students because they're here on a fellowship, and some people are international students because they're from really, really rich, you know, parts of the rest of the world, and some people international students because, I don't know, like they were refugees, like, and came 4 years ago. Like there's such a large variety of experiences that it's just a weird label for me.
Yeah, international. Yeah, international is not an identity. International is just the reverse of American. That's it.
Yeah.
Like it's a negative definition, so it's not a definition.
Yeah, but yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know. It's just it's such a loaded question, because then there's lots of questions too for me of like I don't know, like in France, I'm seen as other because my dad is Italian, or like I'm kind of, it doesn't look like it here, but I'm kind of tan for regular white French people. And I don't know, like I've often been thought to be from places that I'm not from, and I don't know, and here this doesn't come through, and I'm just expected to have the experience of a French person, whatever that means. I don't know if that makes sense. Like it, I don't know. If so, there is something to say, because it's like,
I was just about to say that
like,
American ignorance helps. You all don't know anything outside of your countries, and sometimes it helps. Sometimes it's just,
I mean,
just a bummer. But
it does help, but then it's also like all of the expectations that are put on what it means to be French, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not from Paris, and I didn't drink champagne until I was like in the US because I'm not rich. Like, I don't know, just like weird things, weird expectations that people have of like being French that are just, I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm not answering the question, but it's just making me think about that. Like, I feel like there's this sort of weird double thing where like I'm expected to be French in certain ways, but then in certain contexts, if I talk about my experience in France, people are like, well, yeah, but you're the US now. Stop talking about France all the time. And you're like, well, you're talking about the US all the time. So like, why can't I talk about my experience all the time? I don't know. It's just whatever, but.
I like how you answer this question, Jordan, by giving no answer, because it really shows how complex it is. And it is not, oh, did we lose somebody? Okay. It's a very diverse group, and people use like overgeneralizing ways to describe international LGBTQ folks. Maybe they would just define me as a Chinese person, but I don't really like to define myself as a Chinese. I would prefer to identify myself as a global citizen. I don't want to define somebody as just their country of origin, because there are so many other life experiences have shaped who they are. Like I think I become a very different person after living abroad, and people just expect you to behave like their stereotypes, and and that's not what I want to do. And when you challenge them, they think it's your problem.
yeah, definitely. Well, I'm gonna jump to the last question before I ask the question that are on the Q&A. So please post your questions on the Q&A if you have more. I see you, I see the questions. And the last one, so how have you found community on campus? Or have you not? Well, I'm gonna start. To me, it was pretty easy, but it was also easy because I thought to find community in Paris. It was hard, but I've learned how to do it. I had this experience before. So when I arrived here, I knew that I just needed to identify the leaders and be friend with them. That's basically what I did. So I identified the queer group. I attended 2 events. I saw that there were 4 or 5 people talking more than the others, and I was like, bestie. that's what I did. And then I was included as being part of the board around winter quarter, I think. So it was pretty quick to me. But again, I had this experience before and I struggled before. So yeah, but it's a culture that queer culture in the United States value a lot. Extrovert, weird but not too weird people. So I knew what to expect, I guess. That's it.
Yeah, I think I have like a somewhat of a different experience in the sense that when I first came here, I was teaching here, and then I taught here for at UCSB. I taught for 3 years and then switched to being a grad student. And so like for the 3 years when I was teaching, it was almost impossible to find community because like there's no, at least like in the very specific teaching position I had, like you're not really like professors, but you're not a grad student, but you're their age. So which space can you go to? And so after struggling for 3 years and being isolated, kind of, as soon as I became a grad student, I was just like, okay, like Soler said, like I need to find the groups and be part of it. And even at the beginning, if I don't feel like going to events or I'm too tired or whatever, I just force myself to go to places just to be there. Even if at the beginning, a lot of the time, like I wouldn't talk to that many people or nothing much happened, like at least I was there. And then appearing on people's radars a little bit, right? In the sense that then suddenly they remember that you exist and they might invite you to play to things. And then, yeah, as soon as I could be involved, in leadership position, I try to do that because I feel like the easiest way to find community is to be in leadership position because you have to create it for yourself and for others. So or help maintain it if it was already created before you. But so
Yeah, like definitely agree. Like just show up to everything. Like even if you don't talk to them, like as time went by, like they just know you. Like that's pretty much my experience. I just show up to everything, and now like a lot of time, like even though like some people I never talk to them, but like they know who I am, and I know who they are. I we're some kind of in a loop because like I feel like UCSB, like the queer and trans community is like such a small circle. First, like it might be just because like I'm already like kind of in the circle, so I feel like it's a smaller circle. But it just feel like if you go to a queer event, these are like some of the people that are bound to be there. Like you will see them everywhere. Um, so like that's like a good way when school was like in person. But now I guess it's harder. I've heard like people using like dating apps to like find friends, but like only for like lesbians. That one only applies for lesbians or bisexual women. Because like all my like lesbian friends, like they just find each other on like dating apps, which is really funny to me. Just because I'm a gay man. um, yeah.
For me, I think I went to several events. I went to QTGSU events. I also went to Asian and Pacific Islander organizations events. And I mostly connected with people from my program because we do so many things together and it's a very demanding program. So we rely on each other for mutual support. And I guess I just want to add, in addition to the campus, it's also important to develop your connections with your friends and your family because of your international background. You might have connections in other countries as well, not only in the US. And for me, my life has become much better after COVID because I was able to leave Santa Barbara and move to San Francisco right now, where I'm living with my friend, and I just have more friends and resources here in the Bay Area, and the city is more diverse. There's more food choices, from my culture. Life just becomes easier when I left UCSB. And not because I hate UCSB, but because of the connections, the source of support that I have. And I think everyone has different sources of support. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna tell the questions that are on the chat now. So the first one is there discrimination within the LGBTQ plus community in your countries that doesn't make sense to you? All of them, my friend. All of them. But within the LGBTQ community, there are so many. I don't know. The most hurtful to me were, I mean, it was really about race, but I feel the first experience that I had with that, I was 11 years old or 10 years old within the queer community, yes. Because I was 11 years old and my stepfather was laughing on the couch, being like, oh, queer people who are Asian, never. And then I went to a forum of queer people on the internet, and I typed something like black, homosexual, or whatever, I don't know what I typed. And I ended up on a forum with people saying, I will never date a black person. And it was like a series of it was like 20 pages of racism, literally, with like no comments to save. It was 90% racist, and of course I was 11 years old, so I just scrolled and read everything. So yeah, no, I guess just feeling completely invisible for a while. And I think I thought I was ugly till I was like 21, and I met, because I felt invisible, and I was just like, well, I'm ugly, it happened, you know. And then when I discovered the Black queer community of Paris when I was 21, I just realized that actually, no, it was just racism. But yeah, so I guess, racism was the hardest for me, still is.
Yeah, I mean, like Solar said, like discrimination doesn't never makes sense. The one that always makes me laugh, because for me it's just absurd and I don't understand why. And it's the same here, so it's not specific to France. Like I find the same here in the US, is like a lot of gay men who are just like, I will never date someone with long hair. And you're just like, oh, okay. Like, well, I don't know. I mean, I know that like in their mind, the idea is long hair equal feminine, and I'm gay, so I want a man, and a man is masculine, and whatever. So like, I understand the like pseudo logic behind it, but it's just like, I don't know. I just really don't get it. And it's not, you know, I don't know if we can call that discrimination, because it's not like people with long hair are oppressed or whatever, but it's just weird to me when people just have this sort of like blatant rejection of like, I just would never do that. But it's a preference. I don't know.
I mean, I feel like from my experience, like there isn't like any correlation within the LGBTQ community in China as far as I'm concerned. Like I feel like, okay, gay men are just doing their own thing, and lesbians are just doing their own thing, and bisexual people don't exist. um, and like trans people are just like very invisible. Um, they don't really have like as like strong as presence. Um, like I feel like one thing is like like the discrimination against like bisexual people, like within like the gays and the lesbians. Um, I mean, it is very complex because there is a logic behind it that is saying, oh, if you're bisexual, then you have a choice. You know what I mean? So like, so when you have that pressure to be in a heterosexual relationship, then a lot of like gay people feel like, oh, like you have a choice. So like we're not the same. Um, so that is like a a phenomenon that I observed. Um, and also like racism, it is a thing. Like anti-blackness, it is a thing in China. It is not as pronounced because we don't really have a lot of black people here, but it is it is there, and I noticed. Um, what else? Yeah, and also like the whole thing, like, oh, bottom shaming. That is so prevalent in China. Like if you're feminine, if you're bottom, you're literally at the bottom of the food chain. Like you don't have any choice. Like you should be grateful that anyone wants to date you. It is a lot.
Yeah, on the same note, regarding bottom shaming, I was so shocked that a friend taught me. So there's live streaming event where the host shares contacts of people for um, for others who are interested in pursuing them, like in terms of intimate relationships. And if you are a bottom, you are cheaper than tops. So you have to, pay money in order to get their contact information, like like for example, $50 for a bottom, but $100 for a top. I was so shocked. This is related to the patriarchy system, how women are devalued than men, and in same-sex relationships, bottoms are also devalued compared to tops. And thanks for talking about stigma towards bisexual people, Kaidong. I think it's this is this is something that I'm currently working on. I'm interviewing bisexual activists from China and mainland China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. I'm trying to develop a measure to internalize bi-activity among Chinese bisexuals, because there are so many negative messages towards bisexuals. And something that I found interesting when I was interviewing an activist from Taiwan, like she told me, in Taiwan, because they are more progressive and in terms of LGBTQ movement, there has been going on for many more years, and now different groups have been separated from each other. Like gays have their own issues, bisexuals have their own issues, same for transgender people and pansexual and non-gender binary. But in China, because of the overall oppression for LGBTQ population as a whole, actually different groups unite together to fight against the oppression. So when it comes to like LGBTQ movement, I see a lot of LGBTQ organizations actually work together, and when they do their campaigns, they try to include as many people as possible. Yeah, like LGBTQIA. They all try to include. Yeah.
We are running a little bit out of time, and there are still 2 questions, so I think I'm going to ask them together. And if we can just answer quickly so people can leave if they want to. So there are 2 questions. Is there any fetishism that you notice towards the LGBTQ plus in your country that has made you uncomfortable? And the second one is, when did you realize that you were LGBTQ plus? I guess I'm gonna start. Fetishism towards LGBTQ plus. I mean, yeah, definitely a lot of straight girls who want to try something just because accumulate so many oppression, it makes them look good. That for sure. And also, I guess the fact that, frankly, in Paris, all lesbians look alike. Like, there is really like a Homa culture with a lot of white girls, super skinny, John Lennon glasses, short hair. And if you're any different from that, then you enter in the fetish box because you just differs from that. That's it. So yeah, I guess that's the fetish for the queer community, and of course male fetish on lesbians, but that is woo. So yeah, people immediately being like threesome, and yeah, well, that's classical, man. And when did I realize that I was LGBTQ? I don't know, always. I didn't know what I was, but I know that super young, I think when I was 3, a man stopped me in the street in Haiti and he just told me, boys don't wear skirts. And it happened so many times in my life. So even before I questioned my gender, people did it for me. Way before I even knew anything about myself, people were already like attacking me. So I experienced like homophobia, queerphobia, and maybe a form of, I don't know, some gender things very early. And I knew it was something about me, even though I didn't know my identity clearly.
Yeah, for the fetish part, I'm not sure. I mean, there's similar things as in the US, like Soler said, straight men wanting, like, fetishizing lesbians, and then a lot of straight women wanting a gay best friend, or like, I think that's just similar. Yeah, for me, it was a lot of, I was not necessarily identified by others as gay, but there was that thing of like, you're not like other men. And I'm like, well, that makes sense now. um, and it was like, oh, we can talk about emotions, or we can hold hands and talk about it, our feelings and trauma without it becoming physically intimate. Like, it was just so sort of like, I don't know if it was fetishization, but like a lot of cis straight women were becoming friends with me for that, for the sort of like emotional connection, or like, I don't know, like for wanting to like work through their trauma and process their feelings with someone that's safe. I don't know.
Actually,
And then,
sorry, we're just not running out of time. I messed up. We end up at 6:30, so take your time.
and then for similar to Soler, like I don't know, it's the kind of thing where like, it's like I always knew and I never knew. Like, I don't know, I never really thought about it. And for as long as I was in France, I always had that position where like I didn't want labels. I was like, well, if people need to use a label to talk about me, that's their problem, but I don't need one for myself. Which I don't know exactly how I feel about it now, but that was always my position in France. And so I remember just not caring. Like, people were like, are you gay? And I was just like, sure. Like, I don't care. Like, and then I don't know. And then the next day they would be like, oh, but you're like kissing a girl now. And I was just like, I don't care. Like, I just, want to be with people that I want to be with, or I want to do what I want to do. Or like, I remember like as a child and as a teenager, especially like at 11, like I started growing my hair. And so more and more people starting thinking I was a girl, or, calling me miss or ma'am or whatever. And I just remember not caring at all. And everyone around me was just so offended for me, right? Like, if I were with my mom or with friends, like, they were so offended. And I was just like, I don't care. Like, I don't understand why it's such a big deal. So like I said, like, I didn't necessarily know that I was LGBTQIA plus or whatever label that I'm using now, but I just knew that like I didn't seem to have the same experience as other people, because I just didn't care that much about those things. Yeah. and then to this day, like I've never come out. Like I don't necessarily feel the need to just like announce things. And in the past, like I married a trans man and my mom was there at the wedding. So I mean, it's pretty much known, right? It's not hidden. But people, there's still this sort of weird thing in my family or my friends and friends where it's like everyone knows, but no one talks about it. And it's like, well, if you don't know, then we don't need to talk about it because you don't need to know. And if you already know, then we don't need to talk about it because you already know. And so it's just a sort of weird, like, I don't feel like I have to hide because I can just do whatever I want, but there's not that big need of like announcing it or putting words on it or having a conversation with my parents about it. Like it's just a sort of, yeah, sort of.
Yeah, sorry, I have to jump in. It's just like what you talked about was like really uh relatable. No, it's like, okay, so first of all, like the fetishizing thing, like you guys basically covered it all. It's I feel like it's the same deal across the globe. Like straight men fetishizing about lesbians, and you know, people going after Eurocentric people. It's okay. Like if you like Eurocentric beauty standards, but like, you know, chill. I kind of want to talk about like the necessity of coming out, because like before, like I've known that I like men since like I popped out. I was like, I came out and was like gay, okay. But I never, I just assume that it's just like a normal thing or a common thing, like people just like, you know, who cares. So I never really try to hide myself. And like my parents are pretty liberal and they pretty much raised me gender neutral. Like I remember, like I told my mom and my grandma I wanted a dress and they just made me a dress. And I told them, oh, I want this doll, and they'll just buy me the doll. And I wanted this car and they'll just buy me this toy car. So it was pretty gender neutral, so I never really struggled with it. But then it was not until like then I went to school, then I was outed. So I was outed by my friend to the entire school and to my family. So that was like the first time that I feel like, oh, maybe this is like I need to come out, because like I feel like it is one thing that I feel like, oh, I don't need to talk about it, because like if you know, you know. Um, it is another thing that you told someone about, you know, you told other people without my consent about like my personal information. I kind of feel like I'm, you know, me coming out to my family, like having those like awkward conversation, like really helped me to like gain back the control. So like that's just like my experience. It's like really weird. um I had one more thing, but I forgot. But it's fine. We can just move on.
Yeah, I don't think have things to add to the fetishism question. In terms of my own identity journey, I think right now I identify as a bisexual. I used to like girls when I was um, a child, but I was also interested in boys. Yeah, I had a crush on a girl, I think in elementary school. And then in high school, I had my first relationship with a boy. And I identified as a gay man for many years. And then I realized, oh, I just feel like I'm different from other friends, like the way they talk about women and they don't really feel attracted to them. And then I somehow felt my sexual desires towards women. So then I started coming out as bisexual. Um, and yeah, I guess what I want to say is that take your time to discover your own sexuality and your identities. It took me many years to figure out my sexuality, and I'm still discovering myself. And um, I didn't know the existence of like they, them pronouns when I was in other countries, and I didn't know it's a big like a trend right now in the LGBTQ community in the US. But it made me think about my own gender identity and my own gender expression. Like, I always also dislike other people labeling me as a man. Um, like I don't like I think I need to acknowledge the privilege that I have as a cisgender male, but I just feel like sometimes I feel there's some discomfort, or there's part of me that is not being seen when I'm labeled as a man. So maybe I will explore more about my gender identities in the future. Yeah, I just really think it's a journey, and you need to take your time to figure out yourself. And for the sake of time, I will just answer the questions for me right now. I'm open to date people of any race or culture.
I'm not sure they can see the question, so I'm just gonna say it. The question is, are you open to dating people of any race or culture?
Yeah, I can actually see. I can see the two questions.
No, but for the people who are.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But you can answer now.
Oh yeah, okay. So for this one, I'm open to it because we don't have time to expand. And then the second question is there anything we can do to make UCSB community more diverse? I think UCSB community is diverse in terms of nationality, race, gender, and other aspects. What we need to change is people's mindset to respect the diversity, and how to create more belonging and a sense of community. Yeah, for a very short answer.
Yeah. So are you open to dating cultures? Definitely. I really don't care about your culture. Would be open to that. Race, I don't feel that I'm not open to it. I feel that people are not open to my race. So that's how I see things. And I've never felt fully comfortable in any of the interracial relationships that I've had. So it's not that I'm not open to it, but I clearly don't trust people to accept me as I am. So I wouldn't say that I am not open, because yeah, don't think I'm the problem here. And is there anything we could make to diversity, problematic word. I mean, not problematic, but the thing with diversity is that I feel that here it usually means how it's just reduced to bodies. If it is just to have people who look different a little bit all over the place, then it's fine, but people don't, then it's like, I feel that people want diverse bodies, but they don't want diverse ideas, diverse languages, diverse art, diverse philosophies, they just want the bodies. So if that's what people want, then it's easy. Just hire more people and accept more people in the programs. I feel the difficulty is to accept us fully in our complexity.
Yeah, of course, like, yeah, I'm open to dating pretty much anyone. And that was also the thing that was difficult in France, where people were like, oh, you're gay and you're just interested in men. And I'm just like, no, I don't know. For me, it's just whoever I know. Of course, I'm not saying that those other things don't matter, and they matter to the person's identity and they matter to the person's experiences and all of that. But if I vibe with the person and if there's a connection, why should that matter for the connection to happen? Like, I don't know. That I don't understand people who have that as a criteria for even a connection to like potentially happen. I'm just like, well, I don't know. And then, yeah, I have the same issue as Solaire with diversity, and Solaire said it perfectly. And I think the only other thing I would add is also, like, there's a lot of diversity. It depends then how you break it down, right? There's lots of international students. There's not a lot of Black students. So how do we define as campus being diverse, right? But then also even among international students I think is also how many international students are in positions of leadership, right? Or how many people from diverse backgrounds are in position of actually driving UCSB forward, right? Or are we just there, like Solaire said, as bodies or as numbers, and then the leadership is still the same and they're still doing whatever they want. We're just allowed to be on campus, right? So then that's always the question.
Okay, so for me, first question, yes, and I have been dating people from different culture, background, and races. It is so much fun. I recommend it, but not for the right reasons. The second question, I feel like the diversity thing, UCSB can be improved definitely in terms of like the composition of like different colors and bodies and skins. But I feel like the one thing that we could do is just be vocal and take up your space. Like, you are here and you deserve to be here. You don't like, whenever you feel like, oh, maybe this is not for me, maybe this is like not my place, it is your place. Take your space. Be present. That's how we see diversity, because like, even though like UCSB only have like 1/3 of the white students, but like I feel like they take up most of the spaces. Like, just do it. Like, you can do it. Like, you deserve to be here. And also, like, I truly believe in affirmative actions, but it failed during the last election, which is really sad. It is a whole discourse I will not unpack right here. But yeah, just be vocal, take up your space. That's my advice.
Well, we're gonna end up on these good words. Take up your space and be vocal. And I'm gonna hand it out to Ashley.
Right. I would like to thank you also so much for your wisdom, sharing your experiences as part of the LGBTQI plus community, as well as the international community, as well as the broader UCSB and Santa Barbara community. Thank you so much for your time this evening, and for all those who came to listen and learn and pose questions. We appreciate you being present in this space with us, and we will hope to host some more conversations and continue this dialogue as we go. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating this evening, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week and join in with some other International Education Week events. So.